fifth time, Dr. Mwalimu K. Baruti. Dr. Baruti, are you with us, sir?
Yes, I am. How you doing?
I'm doing as well as can be expected under the circumstances, but I am delighted to hear from you again, sir. How are you?
Everything here is good. In fact, this was a very, very nice day here.
Right on.
Including the weather. it was just a good all-around day. It's nice when the students are so much on point that you can almost just watch. You know,
wow.
it was just one of those days. Today was the first rehearsal for the K.O.W.S lecture here. And the children, they participate in that because they demonstrate in silence the three major positions that our ancestors were packed on the slavers coming across the Kemetic Ocean. And the first time that the second K.O.W.S lecture, they wanted to participate, and I'm thinking, how can they do this? Okay, well, they can just, show how the positions, were. So we practiced on it a few weeks, and they got out there, and the audience of adults was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. They got up quietly, you couldn't even hear them walk. Surrounded, took pictures. So since then, I was going to say we've been using children, but no, the children have been using us to get across the point, to be the teachers. So today was the first day of that, and everybody there except for one student who was really on point himself has done it before. So it was gratifying to see them understand the magnitude of this and to do it so well. And that was just a part of the day. The list goes on. It was really a nice day. It was really a nice school day. And I'm assuming that this will top it off.
I hope so. It sounds like the students are indicating their progress is indicative of the professor and knowledge that you have bestowed upon them. So I'm sure they're just reflecting your wisdom and insight. I'm going to hop right to it, see if we can share as much from this book as possible. I highly encourage folks, get this book. It will help you understand a lot of the confusion and chaos that you see all around you. If you're at Blog Talk Radio and you can see the image attached to this, the sex imperative will help you grasp all of that. I wanted to start things off. You have a lot of terms on the front cover, and one of those terms, the Kinsey Report. I think Dr. Cambone, I think he would be appreciative. We try to stay on our job here at the Cows. I didn't know what that was when you were here last time in August, and we talked about this book. Mm-hmm. Since that time, we had a whole program just about the Kinsey Report. Okay. Dr. Judith Riesman, she is a suspected racist. She was here. Are you familiar with her work?
I am familiar with that interview, with that discussion.
Oh, okay.
It was sent to me by one of the audience, one of the individuals who watches regularly, or listens regularly, should I say?
Wow! Thank you, audience member.
Yes, I was pleasantly surprised to be disappointed in what was said, but expected. Because it's the even though there are, of course, I guess pretty much everybody has been taught that there's going to be truth in even the greatest of lies, but a lot of energy was put into, well, it seemed to me, and I didn't listen to the entire thing, so maybe I'm not talking about it in its entirety, but it seemed that there was a lot of energy being placed into discrediting the objectivity of the Kinsey Report in terms of, and I believe I'm talking about the same thing, in terms of the representativeness of the sample, in terms of where the sample was taken from and who the sample was composed of, and the objectivity or what have you of the individuals who were doing the survey and other things. To me, the Kinsey Report, as well as the Masters and Johnson studies, these are, to me, windows, very small windows to the soul of European sexual insanity. We have to begin with questions about why would these questions even be asked in the first place. We have a scientific community in this society, in Western society, that has asked all kinds of questions. It's the same scientific community that would think a valid question for scientific research was what animal's vagina was closest to that of the humans, and of course they came to the conclusion that it was the sheep's. You have to ask about the mind that would bring that question out of the question in the first place. That question would never have occurred to me. That question would never have occurred to our ancestors because it makes no sense to ask a question like that. What will be the purpose of that? For them, there is a purpose. When you look at these large amount of studies that they did and that they continue to do on sexual behavior, these sexologists and psychologists and whatever other name that they have given themselves, we're looking at individuals who are trying to keep alive or promote to a point where it becomes the norm things that Europeans do. And one of the ways that you do that is to show something's prevalence. You show that it is, even if it's to a minor degree, you show that it exists. You show that that this is a quote-unquote human behavior. And, of course, the assumption is that Europeans are humans, but you show that this is a human behavior, that it has persisted through time, and therefore there must be something correct about it, therefore there must be something about it that's worthy of study and consideration and worthy of argumentation, which, of course, for me, I'm not going to argue on or about points that don't make good African sense, because that gives them validity in the debate table, in the room, where a discussion could be going on. So when you're talking about the size of the samples, I mean, you look at each one of those reports, they talk about bestiality. When you look at each one of these reports, they talk about homosexuality. When you look at each one of these points, they talk about sadism. In the Masters and Johnson, and also, I believe, the Kinsey Report, one of the conclusions that they reached was that white teenage males, in the act of sex, one of their most gratifying things is to be bitten during sexual intercourse. I'm talking about to be bitten to the point of drawing blood. This is one of the things that they enjoy. The information about asking questions about not just bestiality, but what is your favorite animal to have sex with? That the idea that you would even have these questions in a survey, and if one person answers them, that to me says an enormous amount about Europeans and their sexual insanity. Of course, that also says quite a bit about what point they have us in our menticide in terms of how many of them are willing to admit this behavior is going on or not. When it is reached a point in the surveys where you're having more and more people admitting to these behaviors that has been going on with them since the caves, then you know that they have us in a position where they feel comfortable with admitting what they're doing. It's sort of like COINTELPRO or like other government operations where at the time that it was being enacted, at the time that these things were being done, at the time that we were most alarmed about them, they were in complete and total denial that these things were going on. They were in complete and total denial that there was any involvement whatsoever in these secretive, destructive activities. But as time has gone on, as we have come to include them more in the human family, if you will, as time has moved us to a point where we think that we're them and we are trying our best to become part of the CIA, part of the FBI, part of all these other rest of these organizations, we have been that sub-integrated, then they can begin to admit that yes, they were doing these things. Of course, that was their ancestors and not them now. But and that, of course, was said sarcastically. But when it gets to a point where now, if you did these surveys, those same questions would come out. They would even be more detailed, and you'd have more people admitting to this as representative or unrepresentative that the sample may be. That to me is, even though I understand the science of it, it's irrelevant in the sense that this is a constant. This is a constant part of the discussion, and it's the way of people who want to keep certain things alive in people's minds and thoughts. Some of the people whose minds is kept in will find this interesting and try to move in that direction, since that is what they do, and this is something that they find interesting or enough to imitate or copy or what have you. But to keep that idea alive, these studies I found so very interesting because the questions on them, many of the questions on them, I found extremely shocking. And I'm sure that for most of the people who I grew up with, for most of the people who are part in and out of our community, they found the idea of these questions shocking. The idea that the greatest sexual satisfaction for the person practicing bestiality was a combination of sex and violence, where the favorite animal for sex, of course, was the sheep, which, of course, was connected in terms of numbers with rural areas. But we see the dogs, especially with the white women, walking around in the particularly Manhattan, other areas, and anybody with any degree of intelligence and understanding of European culture know what's going on there. They are walking with their boyfriends in many cases. The idea of even asking the question or answering the question that the chicken was the favorite animal to have sex with, and then at the point of orgasm to snap the chicken's neck, to kill the chicken, that directly connected sex and violence, in my mind, in terms of what they were feeling, if we want to call those feelings, but if that's what they were feeling at that time. And this is reflected in so many other areas of their life. If I had thought about it before I had really begun doing the sex imperative research, before looking at the Kinsey Reports, before looking at Masters and Johnson's work, right? I looked at Masters and Johnson's work back in the 70s, but I didn't realize what I was looking at. I didn't understand. I wasn't making those kind of connections because I was still pretty lost. But having read it the second time, just like having read Man-Child in the Promised Land the second time, having read Man-Child in the Promised Land to make sure that it didn't have material in there that the students here shouldn't be reading, discovering in there a great appreciation for white girls, pro-homosexual things in Man-Child in the Promised Land, which I found very disturbing, but the first time that I read it, when I was not aware, I didn't see this. So these things, these discussions are not the studies that reflect these ideas, these interests, these insanities. They are appreciated by a population, a majority population in terms of power in this society, in terms of Western society. The reason why these studies are so glorified, the reason why these studies are so appreciated, the reason why these studies were so well funded, the reason why these quote-unquote scientists are held up as models of good scientific sexology, if you will, is because they were pushing the agenda of who they are, of their people. And in there was just enough for them to know, okay, well, yeah, we're still us, and we're moving along the track, and blah, 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 but not enough to alert other people at the time that this was what was really going on with them. Imagine what would have gone on in their minds, just like if we had known when they came to the continent that they were pedophiles, that they were homosexual in nature. Imagine what would happen in our community in response to or reaction to the Masters and Johnson report or all of the other reports that came out or studies that came out, if they came out and said exactly what they were about. Well, for most of us, some of us would have jumped for joy because that would have told us that we're moving in the right direction in terms of imitating them. But for some of us, we would have been very alarmed and alerted as to the direction that we were headed in. It might have caused some of us to pause and to rethink our letting down our moral guard relative to them and sexual behavior and trying to be self-assimilated in the society. So these reports, I consider them to be accurate templates. I mean, not templates, accurate. What's the word I'm looking for? Because it's not a matter of them being super accurate. A study like that could not be completely, totally objective in Western society where you have millions and millions of people and your sample is only in the hundreds or in a few thousands. It's not possible for you to extrapolate or infer from that to the society as a whole. It can't possibly be representative, but it does tell you something, especially when you have these studies and they are repeated and you're getting the same answers to the same questions and the same questions are being asked in each one. So we have to look at these like everything else in terms of their political intent, not just in terms of their objectivity or their representativeness. We have to look at them in terms of knowing who we're dealing with, knowing who funded these studies, knowing what would have come out of these studies if they did not glorify, make a large thing out of sexual perversion and sexual insanity. Because we have to remember, these studies were coming out really during the height of the quote-unquote sex revolution, which was simply not a sex revolution. It was simply European sexual insanity being pushed out into the rest of the society or among the people who they had conquered and suppressed within their culture and social paradigm. So it's that those reports came out to reflect a certain mentality. The West at that time saw it expedient, and correctly so, because we had reached a certain level of self-integration in their society. They saw it expedient to push the idea of sexual excess. At that point in time, it really wasn't about pushing the idea of homosexuality or pushing the idea of oral sex or pushing the idea of anal sex or pushing the idea of anything, just sexual excess. And when you get people locked into materialism, locked into excess, locked into having to do this constantly, then boredom sets in a society where you have to constantly have something new, even if it's not better, but the idea that you have to constantly have something new in the society. And when you put sex within that context, which is all that they were doing, they were putting sex in the context of excess, of extreme. They weren't putting it in the context, per se, of different variations of it, if you will, or the sexual behavior added into it. This was the time where they were putting out the I don't know how old some of the folks in the audience are, but when they were putting out the velvet paintings of the zodiac signs with these huge ones that were flooded into the African community with the 12 different positions that you were supposed to go and try. This was the time of the sex revolution. So I'm sure that there were many other reports, knowing European academia, knowing European interest. I'm sure that there were many other reports that were done, but I would suggest that those just did not reflect that agenda as well as the ones that came to the fore. Anybody in academia and anybody on the fringes of academia knows that only those things that reflect the interest of the dominant group are the ones that get published. Who was it? Michael Bradley talked in Chosen People of the Caucasus, how Sigmund Freud wrote a report, did a study talking about Europeans' sexual aggression being a result of them being on the case. This is their premier psychologist. He wrote this point saying that is why his own people, and I'm not separating European Jews from Europeans, they are Europeans. If anything, they are more extreme, at least according to some things, and including Michael Bradley's The Chosen People from the Caucasus. He said that there was a direct relationship between the aggression that Europeans had to experience, the way that they came into existence as a people, and their sexual and violent tendencies relative to other people. This is Sigmund Freud. He said that. And for some strange reason, for I believe it was 2 decades, if not 3, this paper got lost. No one heard of this paper. It did not get out into the public anywhere. It was rediscovered later and then brought out into the public. And I would argue that it was brought out into the public once the attitude toward the humanity of Europeans had changed. These things began to come out when it was the idea that these were just their ancestors had become popular ways of looking at them, and that we were them. We just did not have the opportunity to be as violent and aggressive as them. They had just taken the lead on that in that evolutionary theory type mentality. But even here, when we talk about what gets published and what doesn't get published, that paper from Sigmund Freud did not get published for many years. So when we look at the Masters and Johnson's research, when we look at Dr. this and Dr. that who were these sexologists, when we look at the Kinsey Report, we have to understand that they came out at a particular time, and also that they were the chosen ones to come out. These individuals had a particular agenda. They had an agenda that was extremely sex-focused. And this is exactly what Western society needed to perpetuate against other people through their science. If their science being the premier science, if white scientists, who are, of course, the most intelligent of science, the most objective of scientists, if these individuals said that we're not having enough sex, or we need to have more of this kind of sex, or this type of sex is found everywhere, prevalent, or this is the normal sexual behavior for human beings, if they could get that from their scientists, then it was a done deal. Then we would follow. They wouldn't have to give a discussion. The objectivity of it wouldn't have to be proven. None of that would have to be done, because once it's said in Western society, it doesn't make a difference whether it's a lie or not. That's why so much stuff is still perpetrated against us. Once it is said in the Western media, it becomes a fact by the fact that it was said. Not its truth, but by the fact that it was said, that it was allowed to be on, in the same way that we used to believe the news and everything that was said on the news just because it came on the news, and especially if it came out of a black mouth on the news. So it's not that I'm having a difference in terms of whether these surveys or studies were purely objective or not, or if the scientists were the best of scientists. I mean, I don't know. I really don't care. Or if this the survey, the sample that was looked at was absolutely or even somewhat remotely close to being representative of the population in general that they were inferring to, that they were extrapolating to. My point would be that we need to understand the politics of these. When they came out, what they were dealing with, the questions that they were asked in the first place. You wouldn't pose a question unless it reflected something of your interest. If anybody really has questions about the subjectivity, objectivity of Western science, they need to pick up virtually anything by Wade Nobles, virtually anything by Jacob Crows, particularly anything by Wade Nobles, because he really, really, really dissects the idea of Western objectivity in a number of ways, especially attacking that subjective base that they try to pretend does not exist in their laboratories or in their scientists, that there's no politics involved, that there's no cultural politics that are involved, that there's no cultural anything that is involved, that their science is just human. And that's the biggest farce that is perpetrated on a people who believe that these people are gods in many cases, who believe these people are the geniuses, who believe that whatever comes out of their laboratories or out of their studies is the absolute truth because it's based on objectivity that came out of Greece somewhere. So I put a lot of importance in the politics of those studies. Whether they were valid or not is not really important to me, and I guess that's one of the things that helped me to move away from academia. I never bought the objectivity concept. And I very much felt that the interest of whoever was paying whoever was going to be reflected in the results that were found in whatever study was done. The same way if you have a job and you say something against whoever you're working for, then you're probably not going to have your job the next day, especially if they find out about it, because they're paying you. That's the same thing that scientists do. So the scientists validate whatever society that is paying them, whatever society, and in some cases not paying them. It's just the society that they're a part of. I'm sure a lot of these scientists would have done this for free because they were pursuing the interests of their people. And so when people talk to me about conspiracies, I really don't want to deal with that because they get misfocused away from a cultural conspiracy where it doesn't make a difference what the names are, how much money these families have, or how many governments they've toppled, et cetera, et cetera. You have a cultural conspiracy at work. If you understand the cultural conspiracy, then you know not to trust any of it. You know that any one of them would be willing to replace whoever's in charge of this particular action, regardless of whether they are elite, dispossessed, the masses, what have you. So it doesn't really make a difference. You're dealing with a cultural conspiracy.
Okay. You always said you feel like the Kinsey Report and Alfred Kinsey, the white man who did that study, pedophile. She also reported that he was into bestiality and a lot of other sexually deviant practices. You write that this is at the core of white European culture. And you say in your book on page 106, you talk about how the terms that white people use to talk about and describe sex reveals a lot of their mindset. And you have a list of some of these terms: nailing, screwing, pegging, humping, hitting it, jumping someone's bones, grinding, drilling, gangbanging. Can you talk about how these terms, and a lot of them just reflect violence, can you talk about how these terms reveal a lot about the psyche of white people?
I most certainly can. But before I do, I think that I was addressing the wrong interview when I was talking about that. Even though my points still stand, I think I was addressing the wrong interview relative to this study. I have to go back in my files because this European female who supposedly is scientist, she was mainly focusing on or trying to discredit the Kinsey Report and not Master Johnson, but just the Kinsey Report based upon the sample that was surveyed and the qualifications of the people who were doing the studying, doing the research, asking the questions. But either way, I can, and if that's the case, then I would apologize for that. But I still, I would make that statement, and I don't think that it would disagree with what this individual said relative to these individuals. Of course, for me, and I'm going to get to your question if I remember it. To me, it's that when I talk about homosexuals, when I talk about sexual excess and sexual perversion, what a lot of people can't get to, but I can get to so easily, without a problem, without skipping a beat. When you're talking about European people, you're talking about homosexuals. You're talking about sexual perverts. You're talking about sexual insanity. Each and every one. If there's a European to me who is not out here being homosexual or is not being homosexual behind closed doors, he's a closet homosexual. He just doesn't know it. He's operating against his people, against the way that they have raised themselves to be, against their very genetic fiber. So that individual will be a closet homosexual as far as I'm concerned. So when we talk about, and this is not a waste of time. It's nice. It's a very good piece of evidence because people are able to understand or take in the an understanding of European insanity through different means. Just like some people listen to watch videos, some people listen to CDs, some people read books when they're trying to get the information. So there needs to be different ways for people to get these ideas. For some people, names are important. So, like, for some people, the conspiracy theory does get them to get an understanding of what Europeans are about, and they do need those names. And that's all fine and dandy as long as they understand something about the people who they're dealing with heart or heartlessness. So when we're talking about the bestiality of people like Kinsey, the sexual insanity of these folks, when they're talking about the serial killers, major serial killers in this country, and their homosexuality and pedophilia and all the rest of this, to me that's a given. It's said like that is something that classifies them as different than the average European, when they are the average European. They just have some credentials, or they just have a greater public lust for blood. But for me, that is what they are. And I come to this conclusion, I believe I've talked about this last time or the time before, when you look at a people over their time, and that's what social scientists are supposed to do. When you look at a people over their time on the planet and you find characteristics that have followed them from the beginning until now, then you can say that's those people. That is what they are about. That is characteristic of them. Just like if every time that you saw me in life, I was always giving something to folks who were less advantaged than I was, to homeless folks or what have you. And every time you saw me from the time that I was a 1 or 2 or 3 year old, I was always trying to give my extra cookies, always trying to give my extra pennies, always trying to give my extra dollars, always trying to work for this charity or be in this kitchen trying to help folks to eat and to live in the fine places. Then you would say that is characteristic of me. And there would probably be no doubt in your mind about that. But we don't do the same thing when we deal with a people. We don't seem to be able to make that leap. We talk about what they were doing in the caves. We talk about what we find on the walls of the cave. We talk about what they were doing in Western society, traditional European society. We talk about where the word sadism came from, and where the word masochism came from, and these words were named after people who perfected this art within European society. We talk about where atheism comes from. We talk about all of these things in terms of origins, all these things in terms of continuous practice, but we can't seem to make a connection between that consistent behavior, that historical, unchanged thought and behavior and word, and who we're dealing with now. We're acting like somewhere crossing the Atlantic Ocean, these folks change, or somehow modernity, or becoming quote-unquote modern, has changed them into something else. No, this has made them just more sophisticated at concealing and using what they do against other people until those people work for them. So to know that to know that J. Edgar Hoover was a little girl, that's not like a shock or surprise to me, and it to me it is expected. It's almost to me a question of well, which deviants did they prefer? You know, were they sadists or were they masochists or what have you? Did they want to be the one on the top, on the bottom? What was it? That would be the only point of interest for me, because to me all of them qualify for this. Now, you were talking about the terms that are used in European society, some of them which were coined by us because of how deeply we have been dragged into this vortex called European society and sexual insanity. So we being, and that's the bad part, one of the bad parts about our genius, we'll often take what they have given us, or what they have done, or what they are doing, or where they're trying to get us, and we take it to a level that maybe they wouldn't even imagine in terms of creativity. So some of these terms that we're hearing about, these are terms that are created by our sons and our daughters, because our sons and daughters, with their genius, they put a lyrical twist on, or they add to take an idea and they pull from what they see in their environment that is related to that and turn that into a term that fits whatever that insanity is. But I forgot what it was that you asked me.
Just how these terms that are so indicative of violence, these terms that are used to describe sexual intercourse, how that relates to exactly what you've been saying, the core and consistent nature of white people.
Well, to me, there isn't a distinction between sex and violence for Europeans. They're one and the same. It's becoming that truth is becoming more and more visible in the media. It's become more and more visible in the media over the last 15 years or so. The slamming, the ripping off of clothes. Of course, now that we're doing it seems so normal and natural. So why are we pointing at them? The level of rape that's in society. You virtually can't watch a movie that most folks will go to, especially young folks, where someone isn't raped. You violently raped. The most popular television shows. Good example, in the 70s, the cop shows that came on, they began to involve almost only murderers. Now, before then, you'd had a lot of murders, but there were also, jewelry heists and all the rest of that. But in the 70s, murder became the primary theme in the cop shows. Starsky and Hutch, all of the FBI shows, all of these involve some kind of murder. Now, the top cop shows are shows where there was a murder, but this murder in a great way involves some kind of sexual insanity. That's always a major part of the component. Whether you're talking about CSI, or you're talking about the Law and Order, whatever shows that you're talking about, and the newer ones are taking it even further. But there is this major connection between sex and violence in the media that is more pronounced. And it's not that it's new, it's just that we have been taken, or we have graduated to a certain point where they can begin to now infuse a greater level of this into our mentality so they can take it to the next level. There has never been a disconnect between sex and violence in European society. That started back in the caves. Back in the caves, it was about the domination of women and the domination of lesser men. The argument has been made, and I think it's a valid argument or a valid theory, that the origins of homosexuality, because I would argue that there were origins deep in the seed. Mama Rimba used the word womb. People say Job's two-cradle theory. Mama Rimba said it's a lot deeper than that. A cradle is nice and it explains, and the brother who came up with that concept, he was perfectly on point. I'm not trying to take anything from him. But she said we need to be thinking about this in terms of a two wombs, because that implies something a lot deeper. That applies something at the spiritual level. That implies a transference of blood and disease and everything else to the fetus, which is the people. So in this womb, these caves, and it's interesting, caves look more like a womb than a cradle or a seed, but any one of the terms will do. In this womb, you have the origins of all of this sexual insanity based upon how these people related to each other and related to their environment. And homosexuality, according to this particular theory, originated because the men had to use violence in terms of their hunting, and they had to hunt in packs, and sometimes they, of course, would have to fight off other packs of men in order to get their food or to keep what they had killed and were bringing back. You had to have a pecking order in this, and this is, I hope I don't lose this thought, but this was very related to something that was brought to my attention by one of the brothers in the conscious community here about the silverback gorillas in the Atlanta Public Zoo here. They're using them as an example of homosexuality in nature, because the silverback gorillas here in Atlanta Zoo, some of them are raping other male gorillas. The males are. Of course, they are doing this because they are in an extremely unnatural environment. I mean, these gorillas have yards in terms of where they live that are miles and miles square, and they're confined to these little itty-bitty cages, and you have a number of males in this area, well, not necessarily cages, but little areas. And in these areas, which one of these areas isn't even enough for a teeny tiny piece of what's a normal territory for one silverback gorilla. So you've got them crowded in there just like you have us crowded, had us crowded in the projects, and still have many of us crowded in the projects. And, of course, violence naturally erupts from that. But what also erupts, which manifests itself in a different way among human beings, except obviously in prison, is that a pecking order has to be established. And a pecking order based upon humiliation and a pecking order based upon physical prowess and dominance. So if these silverback gorillas, they do this in order to establish an order of who can do what to who, which tells you who is the highest in the pecking order, who is in charge, who is the one who is able to have his seed bring about the next generation of gorillas, if you will. In the caves, the same thing happened. You had men who had to hunt together. You had men who could not hurt each other physically, so you couldn't have a situation where they just beat up each other to see who came out of it still standing, and that person would be the leader. You had to have a way of establishing this order that would leave them still able to hunt together, to do the things that they needed to do as quote-unquote men. Sodomization was a way of establishing that order. You see this in Greek society. The bent-over male is the one who is dominated. The effeminized male is the one who is, in fact, in Roman society, it was codified. You could be a homosexual male, of course, and be in the military, which was essentially what the military was, but you could not be an effeminized male and be in the Roman military. That's in their laws. So, in the caves, this originated, according to this theory, which I find a lot of credibility to, in an effort to establish an order of domination. And domination, of course, was extremely important in a world of extreme scarcity. These things, just like the rape of women in these caves, the women had no say in these caves. They weren't the ones who had the weapons. They weren't the ones who had the greater muscle mass. In these cases, they were the ones that beat down. That's why you see, and that traveled through time with them, and that's why you saw the development of the feminist movement. That's why you saw the development of lesbianism. That's why you're seeing today among our daughters, so many of them who are trying to become male, are trying to pretend that they're men because they locate power in manhood. They locate power in being men. They don't locate power in other ways. They locate it in being men because in westernized patriarchal society, power is a man's domain. So when we look at sex and violence, there is no such thing in Western society in terms of any form of relationship between two people where domination is not involved to some degree. As people become older, then that the domination comes to be controlling of other people. This is built into the socialization process. This is built into the culture, that domination thing. That domination is best manifest in terms of the violation of someone else's personal space. I guess when you're talking about things like rape, we have to understand that your body is your most personal space. It's a space over which you're supposed to have control no matter what. No one is supposed to have control over your body. Only you are supposed to have control over your body. When somebody is able to control your body without you being able to do anything about it, then you have, your spirit has been broken. You have lost your ability to control yourself. You can feel that in every possible way. It's just like when people get too close in your personal space, you're either going to back up or you're going to push them away, because we don't unless it's like our compliment, then we don't want that individual, or mom, dad, what have you. We don't want people who we don't feel that close with to be in our personal space. They can be in the same room. They can sit beside us in a chair at a table. But when they get too close, we get ugly. We want them moved. So in order to exercise this domination, in order to make sure that this domination is clear, then you have to involve this sex in the this violence and this sex, because it makes it very clear who's in charge, who is dominated. That has to be affirmed and reaffirmed, especially among a people who are very insecure. When you find, and this is even their psychologists are willing to admit that the most secure person is probably the least aggressive person. The person who is in control of themselves and really understands what's going on in the universe, loves people for people, all those things, that individual is probably going to be your least aggressive person on the planet. So we have a society, a culture, of people who, above and beyond any other people, that peculiarity, to use some folks' words, they are the most insecure people on the planet. Frances Cress Welsing talked about that to death. And she can keep talking about it because it is 190% true. And we don't want to understand or see the insecurity. We mistake domination and power as being security. Domination and power is a sense of insecurity. You can never have enough. You can never control what you have. You have to constantly be battling to make sure that you're able to keep what little bit you may or may not have. That's an absence of security. That's a lack of security. And that is rife in the mind of Europe, in the European mind. And that is enacted through everything that they do relative to other people. There is nothing that we can talk about in any of the institutions in society. The economy, it's all about taking from other people, hurting other people, dominating other people. Whether you're talking about education, it's about miseducating people, diseducating people, controlling their minds, corrupting their thoughts. It's all in psychology. Psychology is all about the study of how to control people better. In all of their institutions and all their disciplines, the primary focus is on domination. Violence is just the handmaiden, not the handmaiden. Well, yes, it is the handmaiden, but violence is also the personal expression and the group expression of this lack of security, of this insecurity that has existed among them since the caves. So it's normal and natural to see that as a part of it. What scares me for our children who are walking into this with their arms, in fact, they're running into this with their arms open, is that they don't understand what's coming next. What's his name's daughter, who was the porn star?
Lawrence Fishburne?
Yes. His daughter, in the interview afterwards, she was quite clear. She said, I'm ready to investigate, and this was played on your show. I'm ready to investigate some sadism, some binding, a little pain. That's the next level that we're being taken to. We're not. We're being brought into this in levels, and the apex of this, the highest point of this, which reflects classic European society, the highest point of this is a meshing of sex with pain, in many cases extreme pain, many cases to the death. And this we don't see coming, because this is later. Homosexuality is like the soft side of that. And then you get a pedophilia, so you get everybody involved, which increases even greater pain, because you're talking about adults dealing with children's bodies. And then you introduce on a major scale, because it's already very strong. It's been around in Western society since the beginning of Western society. The idea, and that's one of the things I wanted to say about the rape in the movies. This violence that is connected with sex is so exciting to the young minds because they've been taught about violence, they've been taught about sex, they've been taught about these two as extremes, and now they are bringing them together in one thing. And the excitement that comes with violently doing whatever to somebody and sexually doing something to somebody else, these two things are coming together. And in their minds, they are drawing this as a connection. They are drawing this as a serious connection. So the next stage in this process, which folks aren't paying attention to, it's like we can't see beyond today in terms of trends. We can't, we don't take the time to sit down and think about the logical direction that things are going. Europeans operate on a evolutionary time scale. and that's the way they look at things. That's their theory. So this evolution in sexual behavior is moving us in a particular direction. It's not stopping with homosexuality. They've already really finished with that phase. They've got us thoroughly convinced that this is something that's normal and natural for people. Now we're moving into the pedophilia stage, so now you're going to start finding homosexuals to no longer deny that homosexuals are pedophiles and that they're not associated with pedophilia, because we weren't ready to accept that relative to our children, which took more of us being separated from our children, which took more of our children being violated in particular ways so that they could hate the parents and create a larger gap between them. Now we will see the homosexual community slowly but surely over, I would say, 6 to 10 year period, embracing pedophilia and saying that it's cool, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, blah, 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 versus now, because we're still up in arms in defense of what few children we seem to have left. We're still up in arms about the idea of pedophilia, so they're naturally distancing themselves from it, but it's part and parcel of who they are and what they do. So this movement from homosexuality to pedophilia, which has running parallel to it, but in smaller doses in terms of what the general population knows, sadomasochism, sadism, and masochism. That's what's going to match them. These things are going to dovetail, if you will. They're going to come together in a not too distant future, assuming that this society continues to thrive, if you will. And I shouldn't use the word thrive because we know it's not thrive. I'll say live. I'll say subsist. Assuming that it does that, then you're going to see this as the norm. When you're talking about sexual behavior in the future, then just like you're talking to every television show on now has got some major gay character. I need to stop that. Major homosexual character. I started that yesterday. I need to return to myself. You're going to soon see more and more of this pain and pleasure thing. You're going to see more and more of that. You're going to see more and more of these leather outfits. You're going to see more and more handcuffs. You're going to see more and more chains. You're going to see more and more whips. You're going to see more and more of this in the porno videos, which there's a lot of it now. You're going to see more and more of this, and then, of course, as this comes into being, there will be uproar about that because people still will have problems and issues with pain, but then in time. So you have these things, they come in and go straight up against our grain, but Europeans are so pernicious, they are so determined to turn everyone into them, and they know that, like with quote-unquote good business people, if you're just persistent long enough, then you can make that sale. So they continue with this, and even if it takes them 20, 30 years, in their minds, they got forever. So they will continue to do this until they have turned us completely into them. The question for, I think, good social scientists now is what comes after that, because that's not where it's going to stop. This is an insatiable sexual insanity. This is an insatiable sexual perversion, and they cannot stop at any point. Like they say about serial killers, they're not going to stop on their own accord. They have to be stopped.
Wow. Again, our guest, his fifth visit to the program, Dr. Mwalimu K. Baruti. The address, I wanted to give it out again, akobinhouse.com. That is AKOBEN house.com. You can go there and pick up books, DVDs, outstanding material. I would highly recommend any black person listening to the program go to the website and pick up some material. You talked about the movies and how entertainment, in the book you talk about how both music and television films is a big weapon in promoting this culture of sexual deviance that is just the core nature of white people. I wanted to read a little bit from the chapter Super Freaks. This is page 144 and 145. This is phenomenal. I wanted to read just a couple quick sentences, if that's okay with you, Dr. Baruti.
That's fine.
Okay. This is starting on page 144. You write, "We should know that the common display and vocalization of effeminate mannerisms and mentalities by the likes of Eddie Murphy, Jamie Foxx, Steve Harvey, and Martin Lawrence, even when they are not playing comedic effeminate roles, is not without purpose for those who seek to destroy us by turning us into them. European culture and society use those images and idols which are saying and doing things we would otherwise object to induce us into saying and doing them. Ideas are subtly introduced through humor that have no place in sane minds. And once introduced, an enormous amount of conscious, willed energy is required to dislodge and eject them. The forces of peers, media, and being socialized in a perverted leisure society make individual acts of successful rebellion few and far in between. The most important targets in this move to escalate the introduction of perverted, insane ideas into our minds are the children. You change who a people are through altering their children gradually, generation after generation. And because of their innocence and impressionability, our children's minds are the most fertile soil for the introduction and successful implementation of perverted European ideas. As they grow, those insanities that they have assimilated as normal and natural becomes what they believe they are. Laughter is the seed that enables confusion to take root. More often than not, it introduces the sexual perversions which individuals come to participate in and then develop a defensive appreciation of. Laughter makes the heart grow fonder of things that otherwise are not funny. Western media are acutely aware that if you can get people to laugh at a perversion, they will eventually embrace and or be accepting of it. The sex imperative, Dr. Baruti. Can you kind of elaborate on that? I know it was a bit long, but it was just, I felt like I had to share as much of that as I could because it was so important.
Well, I guess the gist of that whole statement, let me go back a teeny bit. I am, I still am, a pretty good fan of Sanford and Sons, because it's like I can't take the TV, I can't take the movies, but sometimes when I sit down, I need to just get away, and sometimes there can be some fun in there. However, there are the number of episodes that I can watch, that I can tolerate, has become smaller over time, because there were things that were said and done in that show in terms of what was laughter and the laugh track and the audience, that when I was younger, I had really no idea about what was being said. And to me, I found it funny. So they had a show they had one show where I think it was Grady saw the son and his friend come out of a homosexual club, and the whole show was about, is he? But of course it turned out he wasn't. But this whole show focused on that. They have had lines in there that alluded to to European, at least two European men of note who married 12 and 13-year-olds in there. The amount of sexual insanity that is introduced in the statements in that show, which, of course, when I was much younger, when it came on, I didn't hear, but these things got into my head just like they got in everybody else's head. And this is not accidental. It's not intentional. It's like back in the 70s, one of the things that became popular in white in white records, in the LPs, was these hard rock groups would put lyrics or words or poetry or songs on that you could only hear if you played the record backward. And most of these songs had to do something with Satanism or some kind of sexual insanity, blah, blah. But these were things that were intentionally put on. Just like with the so many of the children's movies, particularly come out of Disney, and Disney was a homosexual. Just like which is really evident to me in the parades and the celebrations that they have in Disney World, where you're not alerted to what's going on until you are there, and then it's too late. But in the Disney movies, you'd have, in the film where you have each one of those little pieces where you run those together and you get a movie. But in a number of these movies, there are things that shouldn't be there. There was this movie about these, I believe they were chipmunks or some other kind of rodent, and they were trying to get someplace on the back of a duck, and they were flying, and when this duck went down, was in the city and was flying down between two apartment buildings, one of those slides, those pictures, I can't think of the name of them now, but there was a picture of a naked white woman in one of the windows in one of the apartments. This is a child's cartoon, but it's in there, and there's a lot of that in their material. There's a whole lot of that. When and I'm sure most folks are aware. I mean, in The Lion King, when the lion was tired or what have you and laid down on the edge of the cliff and plopped down on the edge of the cliff, dust came up and it formed the word sex. And this is children's movies. And they know that our eyes see everything that's presented. Our ears hear everything that's presented. Even if we don't recognize it, it gets registered in our mind. Our mind uses these things. Our mind is this gargantuan computer that takes in all information and tries to make it fit and make sense within how we're supposed to think and see the world and reality and our level of consciousness. So they have been very busy about the business of doing this, and that's, I believe that I said it's one of the largest, the media. I would argue that the media is the largest because the media, everything feeds off the media. Even now when you look at a lot of the movies that are coming out, a lot of the movies are based on video games, or they are characters out of which video games are made. But most of the time I'm seeing now the movies are designed based upon a video game or designed to sell a certain character which is on the video game, and these are adult and or children's movies. You create a method, a medium through which you can best get to the minds of those people who you want to destroy, turn into you, what have you. And the best way now is through the media. The best way is through music, through the spoken word, through the sound, through music, through movies, through television, and everywhere you go. My wife, she is someone who can watch TV and can critique it while she's watching it. I can't take it. So a lot of the information that I get about television comes from her and comes from other folks in the community who record this or bring me this or what have you. And so she sees what's going on, and people will. I've seen people frown at me because of the homosexuality and the feminization of African males and the sex imperative. Frown at me as if to discourage me from doing this. They have no idea that she's the push behind this. They have no idea that in many cases she is more determined to squash this and stomp this out than I am. So she brings me these things from the media. And one of the things that she has been telling me as of late and calling me in and showing me this and that is that you can't find, and I believe I said this earlier, you can't find any of the new shows without immediately or shortly thereafter, like we used to have black shows, and then a white character would be introduced once the show was going good. You can't find a show that's a popular show that does not have a significant homosexual presence on it. You can't find that. So it is coming across as if this is normal, but this is being pushed. So you have this small segment of people, if you will. If we want to look at Hollywood, the actors and actresses in Hollywood and wherever else they make, shows and commercials, that's an extremely small segment of the population. European Jews are an extremely small segment of the European population. Interestingly, European Jews, their churches have more out of the closet ministers than any other religious group, organization, denomination, anything. They have more. But this small segment, and I'm not laying homosexuality in the lap of European Jews, not at all. European Jews are Europeans. They may be the most aggressive of Europeans, but they're still Europeans. We have this small collection of people who exist in these studios, who work in these studios behind cameras, who can make it seem like this is the world, and they are making the world believe that homosexuality is normal, that this is something that you find everywhere, and this moves people in that direction. So pretty soon it will be something that you find everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if it became a majority situation in our community, especially among the children, because this is what they see. They're not listening to the adults because the adults have allowed, in their drive to be accepted, be sub-integrated, and out of fear, they have allowed other people to take over the socialization of their children. As Carter G. Woodson said, only fools allow the enemy to try to educate their children. And that's exactly what so many of us have done. So this media is conveying to every listening and hearing ear, even on the quote-unquote black morning shows where you have these world-famous DJs here in Atlanta and other places. A major part of the jokes, and of course these are funny shows, they're supposed to be laughing and telling jokes all the time. The major part of the jokes have to do with sex. And these are children listening to these radio programs in their parents' cars on their way to school or what have you. So you have and the reason why they're so popular is because of their statements and interests in promoting sexual insanity and other things. There was a joke that came on the most popular radio station here about this sister getting rug burns on her knees, i.e. from being sodomized. And she was being apparently pushed forward on the rug as she was being sodomized. This is during the time where children are on their way to school. They're on the school buses. They have the radio. They're in their parents' cars. They're on their way to school, and the parents have these stations on. The parents are laughing. And, of course, the children are laughing, and they're thinking about what's being said. So the media is very instrumental. The comedy aspect of it, in a world where it is so sad sometimes, where it's so hard to live, where people have everything in the world for a drug, which tells you something about the state of happiness in the society versus the state of pleasure, but the state of happiness in that society, in that culture, in that world, where you have to laugh so much. And it says something else about our community where our consumption of comedy is so much more greater than in anybody else's community. That should be a psychological study by somebody relative to the state of a normalized state of depression in our community, where we need so much humor just to get from one day to the next. And through this humor, just like through the music, through the rap, and I've been told to distinguish between rap and hip-hop, through the rap music, these messages are given continuously, and those are the most popular and well-funded ideas. Through the media, particularly the comedy shows, particularly the sitcoms, these images and ideas are constantly being brought into our homes. We are bombarded with these ideas. You can't turn anywhere on television without seeing them, unless you turn to whatever channel show only the old movies. And even there, like I said, the Sanford and Son, Good Times, same way. There was all kinds of stuff in Good Times, and it might not have been every line, it might not have been every show, but there was going to be something in there that you were going to see. It was two shows were not going to go by without there being something in there that implied or insinuated or outright stated some form of sex this or sex that, or amoral behavior, or questioning the values of traditional African values of family and relationships. This is pervasive throughout these shows. So the comedy, it seems to me, has a dominant place in our community. And we don't control the messages that are being given through the comedy. And we know that if you're in Hollywood, just like we know that if you're in politics to a significant degree, the vast majority of politicians who look like us are not our politicians. If you are in these areas and you have come to a point where you are honored as being the best, then you came through them. You're delivering a message for them. They are your employer. You're not just there because you're so good and you can just come in and command whatever salary you want to and whatever role you want to. You came through somebody and you still are in somebody's pocket, or you're not going to get the roles. There's nothing about Denzel that would force Europeans to keep him on their roles. He doesn't own anything there. And that doesn't mean he can't come out and make a movie of his own on the side, but the movies that he's making them for them. And that's evident increasingly in the roles that he has selected to play or been told to play. The same thing applies to all the rest of the folks. So for Oprah to be where she's at says something about Oprah's loyalty to Europeans relative to us. If white folks are promoting you, then you're promoting their ideas. Just like Amos Wilson talked about Kwanzaa and Europeans celebrating Kwanzaa. He said that if your enemy is celebrating, your holidays, and there's something wrong with that holiday, there's something wrong somewhere. So if these people are in the position to be the best, if you will, just like we know that not Willie Mays, Jackie Robinson. He wasn't the best, and even they admitted it in the books and later. He wasn't the best black baseball player. He wasn't close to being the best. But his attitude, his willingness to take the taunts from Europeans, his willingness to smile even though they spit on him, that was what got him into the major leagues. And he opened the door for that to come in. So he was there because they wanted him there, because they wanted a certain image there. If I'm working for you and you're paying me, as I said before, if I say something that goes against you or I do something against you, then I'm not going to be paid by you anymore. And if you're the only employer and I want to keep this job, then I have to do whatever it is I need to do. The actors today, they get their teeth cut in homosexualized roles. They get their teeth cut in saying sexual perversions. And when you listen to Sam, I can't even remember these people's names. Yes, I try very hard to push some names out of my head. Samuel Jackson is an incredible actor, but in virtually every movie he's made, some sexual insanity has come out of his mouth. It has come out of his mouth. And it was usually said as a joke, sometimes towards some European actor in the movie, hey, you're not blah, 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 or you didn't do blah, 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 but it comes out of his mouth. And some people say, well, he welcomes that. That's his style, being, obnoxious or being someone who is always going against the grain. But he's not writing these scripts. He's not paying himself. He's performing. And I told students years ago, and I saw them get silenced because for a second they got it, but then they went back to, these actors. I said, they're actors. These people are actors. They are performing a role. They are doing a job. They get paid for this. If they don't perform that role as actors, then they don't get paid. Somebody comes in who is more willing to do this to replace them. So we have to understand that they are delivering a particular message for a particular people to a particular people. They don't need to deliver the message to them. They're already clear. They're delivering the message to us, and they're using us to deliver that message. They're using us to think that it's okay because we elevate these people. We forget that they are actors. We forget that they are simply athletes. We forget these things. We elevate them to this superhuman, super intelligent, knowing what's good for us status, and follow them like they know what they're talking about, or they know what they're doing, or they're not speaking out of someone else's mind. So the media is a perfect way for doing that. I don't think that there's anything that maybe the schools would become second in terms of pushing that. The church would probably run a close third, but it's not going to run second because the Well, number one, because of its conservative nature. Number two, because you're only talking about one person per church, if you will, or only a small number of people per church, versus athletes, you got a whole collection of entertainers, you got the whole collection of them who are pushing this idea. And when you look in the magazines and you listen to the talk shows on television that follow the actors and actresses, TMZ and all the other 5 or 6 shows that come on with the actors, whenever they're dealing with a black person, they will come up with a question dealing with interracialism. They'll come up with a question dealing with homosexuality, not all the time, but some of the time. And when they do, the answer from these individuals is always what the European mind would say. It's always what the European mind would say. So they're not there by accident. They are there because they have a particular appreciation of European culture and ideas, because they are mental in most cases, because they understand that if they want to get paid, that they cannot deviate from that if they don't agree with it. Perfect example, brother said, use the word fag, which I use pretty regularly, but he's a media personality. He used the word fag to talk about someone in the media, and he's no longer anybody in the media instantly. Okay, you don't stand up to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States. You can be the best basketball player in the world. You won't be there anymore. You can be an exceptional basketball player, come out with your own CD and say something about homosexuals, and see if you want to keep your contract as the best basketball player, one of the best basketball players in the country, that you don't retract what you said or keep that CD from coming out. So this talks about the power of the media over. Have an African actor say something, or an African politician say something about European Jews, and see what happens to him instantly. So that means that what we are saying is not necessarily what we want to say. We're saying what we're told to say. We're saying what we're paid to say. And when we are lucky enough, if you will, to be in these positions, then they are definitely going to direct and control what we say, and it's going to be in their interest, because they need us to be a certain way. They need us to be a certain kind of consumer. They need to have us to have a certain level of loyalty and patriotism to them and to them alone. And they need to have us as insane as they are. Either through training or through faking it or what have you. For them, this is a normal, natural state. For us, it's not. So you either have to fake it or you have to be trained into it. And once that happens, they're satisfied, because you don't see them for what they are anymore. I've seen a number of good movies. One in particular people should look at, which isn't exactly this, but it's close enough. It's called They Live. I think it came out in the 80s, yeah. And it to me, when I rented it, because I remembered it, but I couldn't remember, exactly what it was about, but I remembered it was important. And I rented it a number of years ago, and that's one of the few videos I've gone and bought. It reminded me of things that happened at Morehouse to me, things that happened at University of Chicago, things that I've heard from other people happening, things that I see in Europeans' eyes when they realize that you don't love them. If we pay close enough attention, those of us who know, Europeans are looking to see whether you like them or not. They're trying to find out who is friend, who is foe, when they look into your eyes. And if you don't respond to them in a particular way, and they see you as a foe, they move. They get away from you very quick, whether it's talking about a yard sale, or you're talking about in a mall, or you're talking about at a conference. If they see that you are not friend, if they see that you are not one who's in love with them, they move away from you very fast, because they know they have never stopped trying to check out who is who among us, because their whole process is to make us into them and to control us better. And they can't control people who know who they are. That's what this movie was so phenomenal about, when he was in the store with these sunglasses, and he put the sunglasses on, and he was able to see these aliens for what they were. And the aliens, they start talking into their little walkie-talkies on their wrists. They start pointing. They start working there. He can see. He can see. Call the police. Kill him. He can see. They didn't say kill him, but that was the whole gist. He can see. And that's the way that I feel, if you will, when I'm in the presence of Europeans, Negroes, and it registers to them. And you can see in their expressions, he can see. He knows who we are. We have to remove him. We have to get him out of the way. And I'm very sure I'm not the only person who has felt this. That's very, very clear. And that immediately, that wasn't something that took me a long time to really think about and say, these folks are still studying to see who is who, because they know that they haven't been quite completely successful. They know there are still many of us who aren't sitting in the neighborhoods that they're gentrifying and embracing, holding out our arms and open. They know that there are still enemies in these places, and they just have to identify who they are so they can figure out how to move them out of the way. And they do that primarily by trying to get close enough to you to figure out your perception of them. So they'll be very nice, and then when they realize exactly who you are and what you're about, and that you're not one of their boys or one of their girls, they move away and they stay away until they can remove you.
Context of White Supremacy. And that film, phenomenal. They Live. I've seen it several times. Excellent study of how white supremacy works. Man, check it out. I made a comment that, this was before I'd even read the book, but I made a comment that the system of white supremacy, it grooms black people to be sexually careless and to have a total lack of discipline with regards to sexual intercourse. And I've made this comment several times, and an investor in this program said, I don't like that, you shouldn't say that. And my ears perked because the comment that they made was, I don't like that. And I would encourage anyone listening, don't worry about whether someone likes or dislikes what you say. Worry about whether what you said was accurate. They didn't say what you said is incorrect. They said, I don't like that. I don't particularly like it either, because we have a lack of discipline with regards to sex, but I do think it's accurate. I wanted to read this statement and get you to elaborate on it, because I think it goes to that lack of discipline that we have been trained to have. This is from page 226, where you write that it is also interesting to note that traditional society recognized that the ultimate warrior refrains from sexual intercourse. This form of meditation serves to conserve and focus his energy in order to remain in readiness for war. And we are at war. The elite and sometimes all soldiers in the royal guard and armies of many African empires were eunuchs for a reason. If nothing else, for the warrior, sexual activity should not be his or her primary or even secondary expression of power. Can you elaborate on that for us, please?
Yes, and of course, so many people in denial or wanting to fight anything that moves them away from European insanity or a lack of discipline immediately attempted to attack that. Of course, they always take it to extreme, as if I was saying people should not have sex, as if this should never be the case. Well, if we did that, then we definitely would fulfill the Europeans' wishes of genocide in a very short period of time. The point is that historically, and historically, we find that those individuals who were least, and I guess I need to try to be clear on this, because those individuals who held themselves to being the best of our warriors and the best of other people's warriors, did not make sex the primary thing in their life. The statement by Ptahhotep, he who is ruled by his appetites belongs to the enemy. These individuals, the ones who have been the foremost and fiercest warriors, did not consider sex to be so, and it's hard to explain this because this over-sex society makes that sound like an insane statement, We can't imagine people not having sex for years. We can't imagine people not having sex for months. We can't imagine people who had sex only to have children, because it was that sacred. It was that important. It's not that it was so hated or so disdained, or that it was such a physical thing and you don't want to be involved in physical things. Combat is a physical thing. It was because this was such a sacred thing that your energy needed to be conserved, not only for it when its time came, but also because the energy that was taken away from you through sexual activity could not be used for the other things that it needed to be used for. We have so quickly forgot. When I was in junior high school, and when I was playing around with high school, the coaches would always tell us, before a game, before a track meet, don't have sex. Most of them weren't having sex anyway, but don't have sex. And they somewhat explained it in terms of energy, but it was usually, just a rumor. Well, sex will you'll use up all your energy, blah, blah, blah. But this was understood. This was understood in our community at that time, that these things, everything had a proper time and place, and that there was a greater value in it when it was done in its proper time and place. We look around now. What is the value that we have on sex? This brother in the community, he had the perfect example for his daughter when he was trying to explain to her how little value sex holds in our community, and the importance of her waiting, and the importance of her thinking about it, and the importance of her planning how often or when or why or what have you. And he said, you and your girlfriends go to the club, and they didn't, but he was using that as an example. You and your girlfriends go to the club, and you sit around, have a few drinks at the bar, and you meet this guy, and he takes you home, and you go in the bedroom and change into something more comfortable and come out, and then you two have sex. You never met this guy before in your life, but you've given him the most important, precious part of you without even thinking about it. He said, if that same guy you had brought home sat down on the couch with him and he asked you for $100, you'd look at him like he was crazy. You wouldn't give him a penny. You tell him to get out. But when he's taking the most precious part of you, you're giving that away for free. You're not even thinking about it. That sense of how we have devalued the sexual act, how we have...
Dr. Are you still with us?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
Just wanted to make sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Did we get lost for a second?
No, I just thought you had dropped out for a moment.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, I guess, and you're in Atlanta, the recent scandal with Bishop Eddie Long and the accusations that he committed pedophilia against these young boys. Don Lemon, also in Atlanta, CNN headquarters, when he was reporting on this incident on national television, said that he also was a victim of molestation, pedophilia. Just had the Vibe magazine article that talked about the cross-dressing and homosexual activity at Morehouse. Huge article, pictures, just really elaborate. I kind of wanted to see where this is going, to see the direction that racist white supremacists are taking us. I know you talked about with Judith Reisman, that she talked about the validity of the study. It might have been this program that you heard, it might not, but I know when she was here, she said that Kinsey Report was a key aspect of socially engineered sexual deviance. She said that on the program, and she said that NAMBLA, the North American Men-Boy Love Association, the whole gay rights the so-called women's revolution, even Playboy and the pornography industry, they all owe a debt of gratitude to the Kinsey Report because they all built just incredible momentum from that study. And
Absolutely.
She said, backwards, socially engineered sexual deviance that continues to this day. They have a whole institute at Indiana University that is named after an admitted pedophile and practitioner of bestiality. They had a study that came out just this month. Thank you to April Tuck. She's an investor at the Cow. She shared this with me. They had a study that came out from this institute this month at Indiana University, and this institute, they're budgeted, they get over $500,000 a year of taxpayer money to carry out this research. The study, and this is a report on the study, the name of this report is, in quotes, "The Ass Man Cometh, Experimentation, Orgasms, and the Rise of Anal Sex." This came out on Tuesday, October 5th, 2010, and the short abstract is a new national sex survey. Okay, got that background noise. Let me start that again. A new national survey is out, published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine. It reveals who's doing what with whom and how. It clarifies the prevalence of gay sex, teenage intercourse, and oral gratification. But the big story is the increase in anal sex reported by women and its possible connection to female orgasms. Among women who have had vaginal sex in their last encounter, the percentage who said they reached orgasm was 65%. Among those who received oral sex, it was 81%. But among those who had anal sex, it was 94%. I thought that was incredible. And again, this is from the same institute as an admitted pedophile, Mr. Kinsey. Can you kind of comment on this and what direction we're being pushed in a culture of racism, white supremacy?
In a culture of lies. In a culture where science is political. I just came across something last week that was promoting the idea of women performing fellatio, performing oral sex on males, because it made the argument that the vitamins contained in semen is good for the enamel on their teeth. This insanity. There was a young lady at Spelman who was making a comment during a panel discussion that was dealing with feminism and homosexuality a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, who said we're all bisexual because we were born from a mother and a father. These arguments are arguments that in a sane society would never even be considered. Not to talk about any of this behavior not being done, and not to even say whether this is true or not, because we're living in an insane reality. And in an insane reality, insanity does make good sense. For you to argue against something like that, you would be called insane or somebody who's trying to be the moral police or what have you. Because where they're trying to take us is simply them. They are the power brokers here. They are the ones who are the science. They are science. And whatever conclusions they reach, even if somebody comes along and looks at a same size sample, even though this sample, I'm sure it would be correctly argued as being unrepresentative, but let's say that it was representative. Let's say that it did have 150, 200,000 people in it, that it could be, inferred back to what have you, the country as a whole. You could have a study that came out the exact same time by a number of reputable scholars that showed the exact opposite results, that showed that anal sex did exactly nothing for the female whatsoever, which is very important to point out here because they're talking about the impact of this on the female. They're talking about this not in terms of the male who is really the one who is performing the anal sex, but they're talking about this in terms of the impact of that on the female, which means that they want females to do this. So the positive outcomes in terms of orgasm here is a benefit to the female. This is the direction of the information, because the problem isn't with males who have been indoctrinated fully in this society. So many of the males will do anything, anywhere with anybody. And I'm not just trying to put all men into this category of being dogs, because I know that all aren't. But in Western society, the men are the ones who are willing, whenever, wherever, with females. It's like you can say like the discipline is lower for the male and the female, and that has a lot to do with social issues, cultural issues, as well as biogenetic issues. The female is the one who has to be made more sexually active, receptive to insanity, to sexual insanity, to perversion. I said the sex revolution in the 60s was not directed toward us. We just sort of received we were indirectly impacted by it, if you will, even though to some of us it seems like we were directly impacted. The sex revolution in the 60s was directed toward white women, because white women were not pliable enough sexually for white men. They were not willing to do the things that they wanted them to do, and they had to make them believe that this was something that they wanted to do themselves. So the sexual revolution was about white women. We just joined in the games because we were trying to join in the games with Europeans. The sexual revolution of the 90s, 2000s, if you will, early 2000s, this had to do with the children, primarily our children. Their children weren't having issues. This primarily had to do with our children. From that, someone might argue that what's going on with these type studies is you're trying to correct for things that didn't go far enough, or treatments that didn't work well enough. So the treatment of white women worked out well. The treatment for black women didn't work out that well at all. So black women are still adverse to, in most cases, to anal sex, to oral sex, all the rest of it. They're still adverse to that, even though it's changing very rapidly with the younger generations. So you have to introduce some science to help to convince them that this is the way that they should go. And when you have so many other variables, major shortage of males, major pressure, major push for interracialism, when you have all of these factors at work, then it makes them feel that with the science that there is something going on. I'm missing something. So I need to do these things in order for me to achieve these goals, to achieve this orgasm, to be normal. Science is simply a tool, a political tool for whoever's in power. So the studies is directed toward the changing of this woman. At least those parts of the study, or that part of the study is directed toward, in my mind, African women. Because they're the only ones who, if you will, when you look at who this is supposed to impact, it's supposed to impact those individuals who have not come over, who have not made the shift, who are still fighting against the European norm. That's what the studies are directed toward. It's not directed toward people who are already engaged, who already know, who are already, quote-unquote, enjoying this. It's directed toward those people who they need to have in terms of part of this global orgy that is being created by them. They need to have everybody involved. They need new targets. They need new bodies to play around with. In terms of where it's going, I think that the word global orgy, which is very characteristic in many ways of Greek and Roman society, even though now with a more sophisticated European society, they're taking it to the next level. When you have a global orgy, then you don't have, there's no one out of the equation, and you can just be free to spend your life
engage sexually with anybody and everybody you see. Everybody needs to be brought into the equation because you need more toys. You need new toys. You need to be able to go anywhere and be able to find whatever it is that you want any time of the day, 3 or 4 times a day. And why the need to conserve energy when we're not at war anymore, when they are as much our friend as our family is? So the energy conservation argument would go out the window with that. We're not at war. We're at peace with these people. We're trying to find better ways to get in bed with them. So these studies simply reflect vested interests. They reflect a need to bring in more women into this game. And it is pretty much part of a major game. They need more women to be involved in this, more women to feel that if they get in there, they will receive more enjoyment, more excitement, et cetera, in this game. And that is exactly what the Kinsey Report did. That's exactly what Masters and Johnsons were about. That's what all of these people were about, getting people to, quote-unquote, explore their sexuality, i.e., to become more sexually excessive, to become more sexually perverse, to follow in the way of European sexual insanity. So this report right here, if you will, is just a backup. It helps to any whatever left over that wasn't affected fully enough with the reports from before. Then you have this new wave of studies, and I'm assuming that it's going to be a new wave because that tends to be the pattern, a new wave of studies proving scientifically, like they proved our intellectual inferiority during our enslavement and afterwards, proving that certain kinds of sexual behavior, especially those kinds of sexual behavior that are what I guess they would call the cutting edge in terms of moving closer to being European in your sexual thought and behavior, that these are being neglected by people when they refuse or they're neglecting themselves or they're hurting themselves when they don't engage in these types of activities.
Again, Dr. Mwalimu K. Baruti. Did you have time for a couple questions?
Sure.
Okay. I missed the message somebody sent. Sorry about that, non-Mighty Wick. I thought Justice was not here, but it seems she might be here. We want to double check and see if Justice is here. If you have some questions, Justice, go right ahead. Your line should be open. Justice. Perhaps not. Okay. Let's see. A person who called in from a block number with a hand up, your line is open. If you have a question, feel free.
Hello, Gus. Good evening. Hello?
Oh, good evening. Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Hello, Dr. Baruti.
How you doing?
I am doing great. This is Atlanta calling. I'm in your neck of the woods.
Okay.
So I'm familiar with some of the madness that you were speaking of.
Okay. Yes.
When I was taking some copious notes when you were speaking, and you were speaking of and this is something that Dr. Frances Cress Wilson said in her book when she said that people who refer to themselves as dogs, and when you were speaking about this new onslaught with the homosexual and the anal sex, and she made a reference to dogs, it makes it more easier because dogs normally sniff around their butt, and things that we were seeing more and more men. We were seeing, for instance, on one of those reality shows, what's his name, Randy Jackson, always call it "What's Up, Dog," and refer to everyone as their dogs. And you see it with Snoop Dogg, and all of these people have these dogs attached to their names. And is that a part of this sex revolution that you were speaking of with people to get them to be more comfortable in this onslaught that you were saying is about to take us?
Oh, absolutely. The language is very powerful, and it's easy to do that when people still are so full of self-hatred. The bad part of it is this is really a slap in the face to animals because they act more sane in terms of following their instincts than many humans do. So to call somebody a dog in a way, depending upon the person, may be an insult to the animals. It's very easy to do that when you have such a low level of self-esteem or value other people's income or payment to you to say these things, that you would say them so freely, or even feel that this is the truth, that you actually are this. We associate dogs with undisciplined sexual behavior. There is a instinctual component, not instinctual component, it's all instinctual with them, but there's an instinctual component to how they behave, and they only act in certain ways when certain instinctual things are done. So this is not like them thinking in this way. This is not like them sitting planning what they're going to do, or how they're going to do it, or when they're going to do it. That's more of the human side of it. That's dogs. You could even say that their behavior is more natural relative to what is necessary for them to remain procreative on this planet. But the association that we have with dogs in this society is with unlicensed, undisciplined sexual behavior. Anywhere, anytime, anything. So and some people could say that the buck mentality that was on the plantation among many of our slave ancestors, not enslaved ones, but our slave ancestors, that has helped to facilitate that and bring that into the core, because we take so much pride, and there's a lot of theory behind that, but particularly males take so much pride in their sexual prowess. They take so much pride in the counts, in the number of women that they have conquered, or the number of women who they dominated, the number of women who they control. That's why one of the things that naturally came out of this, approximately the time of the sex imperative, was this flood of books on how to be a pimp. These were really flooding the black bookstore. They weren't keeping up with the romance novels, but they were running a close second in terms of what the males bought. The idea that women are to be looked at in a particular way, that they are things, that they are sexual objects, that they are supposed to be sexually exploited, that is exactly what they're asking for, and that's what they're here for, to be played with. So the idea of calling each other dogs, that's like a great honor. That means that you are good at what you do. You're good at sexing women. You're good at sexually exploiting women. You're good at using women in a sexual fashion. So that is a badge of honor among a lot of males. So that would, to me, a natural outcome of this, where in a sex-focused society, and then among a group of males who in many instances don't have any other way to be quote-unquote powerful. In a patriarchal society, men are socialized to strive to be the most powerful in the society. As wrong as this society is, that's still the goal that you're trained to be. And there are many ways to achieve that goal psychologically. One of the easiest ways, because there is such an enormous number of women, and especially women who have been weakened by the society, using the same logic as the power hungriness of the males, that one of the ways to power is your ability to dominate women. As I said earlier, in this type of society, domination of others is the hallmark of your power. It is the key indicator of your ability to be somebody, and whoever you are dominating, they're nobody, and that's a statement. In this type of society, you do things to people just so you can get the satisfaction of knowing that you could do that to them and they couldn't do anything back to you. That's the type of power that we're talking about. So the being called a dog within that context is a major statement of pride. It's supposed to be a compliment to you.
Wow. I believe Mr. Nero. Mr. Nero, if you have a question for Dr. Baruti, your line should be open, Mr. Nero. Mr. Nero, did you have a question, or are you just listening?
Gus, can you come right back to me, sir? I'm in a pretty loud location.
Oh, okay. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you, sir. Mm-hmm.
I also want to mention this thing in Morehouse's College, on the college campus.
Yes,
you can expect it to grow exponentially. You can expect it to grow large. And what a lot of times we forget that sometimes when quote unquote bad things are publicized, they end up pushing something to a level that otherwise it wouldn't be pushed to. So this even with the college pretending to fight against it, and I know better because I was there. Even with the college pretending to fight against it.
Dr. Baruti, are you still with us?
Yes. Wow. I was talking about...
Dr. Baruti, are you still with us?
I'm still here. Can anyone hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now. Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't know how far I was heard, but this thing at Morehouse College, in Western society, negative things can have a very positive impact for the negatives. Somebody who is a songstress or an actor, what have you, they go out and they get caught in a criminal behavior, and suddenly their record sales go skyrocket. So this right here, which some people are arguing that the college is fighting, the college isn't fighting this, and even if they were, this becomes a means to which something like the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, can use to force the that college and other colleges to accept this as something that needs to be normal and accepted. And the college president, he hasn't said anything against it. In fact, he was very much pro in the statement that he made. And that goes back, as far as I'm concerned, to President Massey when he overrode the students' desire not to have a homosexual fraternity on campus, when he overrode that and allowed it to be in place anyway. So there are things going on underneath the surface and have been going on at Morehouse and a number of other colleges for years, which turn this into a joke if people think that this is in any way, shape, form, or fashion going to be slowed down or stopped. If anything, this is going to increase dramatically, not only because Morehouse has become a magnet for these type of broken individuals, but also because the agenda among a number of individuals there, private and otherwise, have reflected this priority for a long time. It's just now hitting the news.
Wow.
Okay, Eddie Long is not something that surprised me. There was a relationship there with some of the institutions. And when it's like, I'm sure that the sister knows, in Atlanta, if I see a brother with locks, I'm going to assume that he's homosexual until proven otherwise. Just like with ministers, from the things that I have seen and heard over the years, and especially so many who will not speak out against or talk to their congregation about. If I see a minister, I assume that that he's homosexualized or he's a pedophile until proven otherwise, because of how underground this has gone and how pervasive this is. It's what we're hearing is like the teeny tiny tip of an iceberg. This thing is massive.
Bishop Long?
Excuse me?
Didn't Bishop Long speak out against so-called homo?
Yes, he did. And I didn't find that interesting. Yes, he did. But I believe that was political. His behavior says otherwise. I believe that was political. And I believe that was a statement said because there was a opening in terms of the slot of power within the religious community for someone to make that statement, because no one else was. But his behavior says the complete and total opposite. So we know, just like we know in this society, a society of lies, that people will lie because it gives them something or gives them some kind of leverage or what have you. His lying did something for him. I have seen too much and heard too much about him and too many other people in the clergy here in Atlanta to even have even the slightest doubt that it's not accurate, that the claims against him are not accurate, that the claims against other ministers that not have lies yet are not accurate. We have to understand that these people were trained by somebody. So people need to come down here and not only just walk around Morehouse's campus, take a walk through ITC in the center, the International Theological Center in the center of the Atlanta University Center, which is training and has been training black ministers for a long time, and get into some conversations and listen to the voices and see the postures of these males being trained for ministers. Folks need to just take a walk through, and they'll understand exactly what I'm saying.
Wow. Before I get the last call, I wanted to also point out, if it was not for the Kinsey Report, well, I won't say that, but I think the Kinsey Report even has a connection with what happened with Bishop Long, because at least it was reported to me, that report helped reduce the age of consent laws in a lot of states. Georgia, the age of consent is 16. If those laws hadn't been changed, Bishop Long might be looking at some criminal charges for having sexual intercourse with a minor, but because those laws got changed, that's not the case. No criminal charges will be filed. So, very important stuff. Other person who called in with a block number, did you have a question for Dr. Baruti?
Bird?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I wanted to know, Dr. Baruti, had you seen on television, I think it was yesterday, there was an incident of some pledges at Yale University going around marching and chanting about raping women and no means yes. And also I wanted to know, what do you think the ultimate effects will be on the U.S. military if they do end up pushing this open homosexuality agenda through?
Well, I'll answer the last question. Well, let me do the pledge thing first. When you get comfortable thinking that you're in charge, when you get comfortable thinking that other people have become you, when you get comfortable thinking that, you know, you can get away with anything because of this individualism, then you're going to hear that coming out. That's to be expected. And we have to take that as them speaking truth. There was a book that came out about the time of the sex imperative by these two white guys who essentially, using their science, prove that that rape has existed since the beginning of human society. Of course, we have to say their society, even though we know that's another discussion. They said that since that's the case, then this is normal and natural for humans, and therefore rapists should not really be punished for what they're doing because it's only natural. So that's the kind of science that we're dealing with, and we would expect that response from especially the younger ones who are even more imbued with this sense of arrogant supremacy that they can say and do whatever it is that they want to. In terms of the second question, had to do, I lost it.
The pledges at Yale?
No, that was the pledges at Yale. The second thing that she asked about.
Oh, the open door policy with the military.
The open door policy with the military. I love that question. And I love that question because I spent 4 years in the Air Force at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, and then I spent a number of years at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. In Minot, North Dakota, the commander of the base was a full bird colonel. This full bird colonel had a secretary. His secretary was a staff sergeant, a tech sergeant in the military. He was a flaming fag. He walked down the hall switching, hand in air, notebook, pad, and pen in the other, switching, using his rank against people of lesser rank, voice as high as you could get. This was the secretary of the commander of the base. And again, I will add into that, Europeans by nature are homosexuals, evident through what has always been a major part of who they are throughout their existence on this planet. Greek military, homosexual. Roman military, homosexual. Just like with homosexual marriages. It will happen. It will come because you're talking about their culture, their society. And their culture and their society, it's only a matter of browbeating other people until they acquiesce to the idea that this is normal and natural, and then they do what they had planned on doing the entire time. It's not going to have any kind of there's not going to there may be years of discussion. I don't know. I know that discussion, of course, has been going on for a while in the Truth and Reality, but it's going to happen. This is normal, natural European society. And then anybody who's in the military, which is the strictest enforcer of federal law, anybody who's in there had better not have a problem with it. So this will, as they say, this too will come to pass. Absolutely, it will come to pass. So you can expect, depending upon how fast this comes into law, and it seems that it's going to come into law relatively fast, that probably within the decade, it'll be passed, and then you will have, that's like the last bastion. Sports, hardcore sports, if you will, football, military. Those are like the last bastions. And if you can break through those, just like children are like the last bastion to a community, if you can break through those, if you can homosexualize those, then technically it's a done deal in terms of the population in general. So you have to understand what it took for this discussion to get to a point where you have generals in the Army and in the Marines saying, well, if this is what the federal government says, then this is what we'll do, instead of, no, we're not doing that. That's what they were saying years ago. Because of the image thing, because we weren't ready yet, because other people had not been trained well enough. So if it's gotten to that point, then it's a done deal. It's a done deal. White folks aren't against it, and really never were. They just needed us not to have any arguments against it. And are we hearing any of the quote-unquote black leadership or misleadership making any comments about this in a problematic fashion? No.
Wow. We're going to wrap up only because we have program number 2 coming up in 50 minutes, and this is how linked all of the programs are. Program number 2 today is the chemical effeminization and castration of males. That's program number 2 with Dr. Curtis Duncan in 50 minutes. 50 minutes. But I, again, want to tell people the address, please support his scholarship, outstanding material, vital information for any black person on the planet. The address, aquabinhouse.com. The book that we did today, you can pick that up. Complementarity, homosexuality, and the effeminization of the African male. Menticide, he has got gems upon gems. The address, AKOBEN house.com. You can click his name. It'll take you right to the website. I wanted to read a passage and then give you the final word. This is from the final chapter in the book, The Sex Imperative. You wrote that and you were talking about African children, black children worldwide, they need to know that we did not do these things, this sexual deviance, before others corrupted our African self-concept. They must be kept from accepting the propagandic claims of Western media that this is how it has always been. We must use our critique of their propaganda as a means of developing the critical thinking our children need to combat cultural imperialism. We are not being closed-minded or judgmental. We are being African. Our children must be taught that Africans are not Europeans, from page 223 in The Sex Imperative. Dr. Baruti, it is always a privilege and an honor to have you on the program. Anything you would like to say in closing out the program, feel free.
Just what you said, the children. We need to be honest with the children. We need to be truthful with the children. We need to be uncompromising relative to the assault against our children. If not, we're just a lot of hot air. So we need to get to work on this. We need to make sure that our children are protected from this insanity. But Gus, I appreciate you having me on this is the 5th time?
Fifth time.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I look forward to the next time. So I appreciate you and the audience. And I missed that young lady. So bring her back the next time.
She was here. I got confused about, the lines and everything. That was
yes.
Yeah, that was
give her my greetings. Tell her she is appreciated.
Will do.
Okay.
Will do.
Right.
Thank you again, sir.
All right, and you all take care.
Yes, sir. You too. Context of White Supremacy, 5th visit from Dr. Baruti. We will definitely be looking forward to having him here for the 6th time. Gus is getting out of here quickly because I will be right back in 52 minutes. Dr. Curtis Duncan will be here. The program, The Chemical Effeminization and Castration of Males. He is also in Atlanta. How about that? He will be here, like I said, about 50 minutes. I think that program will simulcast both on Blog Talk Radio and War on the Horizon But, if you think it will be constructive to hear about that information, come right back. We'll be talking about many of the exact same issues. I did want to emphasize They Live. Mr. Josh Wickett has a fantastic counter-racist film review at thecode.net. You can go to the movie section, and it's brilliant, excellent analysis of that film. I would highly encourage folks, check it out. They Live by John Carpenter. Excellent example of racism, white supremacy, and how white people will respond to you if they see, this is not one of our typical victims. He seems to know what's going on. Hey, mobilize. We need to do something about here. I think I said before, white people tend to form like a Voltron to work against you. You will see a wonderful illustration of that in They Live, and you can see it. It's online even. It's on Google.com. So check it out. We'll be right back in 50 minutes. Context of White Supremacy. My apologies. I didn't know Justice was she switched up. She was on a different line, but my apologies. I will do better and have her here whenever I can get her back for the program. She might be back for the next one. Her email address, justice.asap@yahoo.com. Again, it's justice.asap@yahoo.com. Context of White Supremacy. We will be right back, 50 minutes.